Thank you. Welcome back to Senate Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs. We are now turning to our housing bill, which we are needing to get out. And we are going to continue our walkthrough and check off areas we are done with. So the objective, my hope is to get our housing bill out either, probably tomorrow may be ambitious, but Tuesday definitely, if we can, and get it over to the other committees that it needs to go to. So my hope today is for us to sign off on as much as we are able to sign off on. My understanding is that the areas we still need to land are appeals, which we have a higher standard, creating a higher bar for appeals now in front of us that the House has sent us. And we need to continue to discuss that. The lot rent increases for mobile homes, addressing lot rents, which may be a bigger topic and not sure we can land that in time for this. And the credit score, I believe those are the only, anything else, Cam, that we haven't that we need to land other than what's here?
My list was walking through the bill, as you mentioned, checking things off, appeals, which, as you said, Ellen's coming in, credit score, lot rent increase, and whether you have any concerns about the landlord certificate after all the conversation that has discussed with the
committee. And I think that we'd probably want Maura and Chad in the room. But as far as I know, I have not heard any objections to what we have in front of us that has been worked through already. So we will is there anything else, committee, that is outstanding? To me, those are the four pieces that we need to. Thomas, we're going to walk through, check off what we're fine with in the housing bill. And then the four areas I have that for consideration to add is not to add, but to agree upon are the appeals, the lot rent or not increases, the credit score, and the landlord certificate. And I think from Becky, we have gotten,
not yet. She's sent out clears.
But she's gotten affirmation so far. I have something from her,
okay,
which I thought she included you on. Okay, great. So, Pam, when you're ready, I think we're going to check off things that we are okay with, and that means we're done with them. So when you're ready, Counselor.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning. For the record, Cameron Wood, Office of Legislative Counsel. Heidi, if you don't mind giving me permission to share, we will get started. All right. Okay, I'm sharing my screen, walking through the side-by-side H479 and 127 as passed. This is the document that you all have, and we've kind of walked through a few times, or we've been discussing and walking through. I'm going to just start with section 1, and we're going to go through. I'm going to pause at each section, and unless there's committee discussion, or Madam Chair, I think your goal here is to try to figure out which sections you're comfortable with and which still need more work. So first off, we have section 1, which is the Vermont Rental Housing Improvement Program, VHIP for both. And my notes I'm going to walk through the sections, but also talk about my notes, my understanding of where you all are at in regards to this. My understanding is you all were comfortable with going with the House version. So it has this, small piece of difference, which I would recommend include. It also does not strike the 5-year forgivable loan. It keeps the 5-year forgivable loan option. You did want to make a change here. You wanted to keep this subdivision, which was added in the Senate version. These are the populations of people that have to be served. You wanted to add displaced due to natural disaster.
Right.
You wanted to strike related to climate change and just keep due to natural disaster.
Right.
And then there was a piece that I had kind of highlighted to keep that was struck, I think, inadvertently, which is that for the 10-year loans, it allows the landlord to lease the unit for fair market rent, but I think inadvertently, the proposal from the administration was to strike this language that the
That's
landlord
3A.
shall, yes ma'am.
Right.
The landlord
Yeah,
shall
reinstate.
accept that voucher, so we're keeping
Mhm.
that. And then there is the minimum set aside that was in the House version.
So 30%.
Yes, ma'am. And the changes that we've made there, if you recall, there's a section in here that says if the funds are not utilized after 1 year, they become available for the 10-year program. You all wanted to reduce that to 9 months. So we drafted that up. I have that ready to go in an amendment to reduce that from 1 year down to 9 months. And then there was a recommendation regarding the reference to revolving fund. The goal is to get all of the monies out as either a forgivable loan or a grant. So it really isn't intended to operate as a revolving fund in the typical sense of that phrasing. So this is in the sub I. So I've just kind of changed that to say it is a Vermont Rental Housing Improvement Program Fund. And the only other thing that I did was I had to fix a subheading in J. J is for the annual report. That's in the House language. It needed a section heading, so I've added a section heading. That's all that you have right now in VHIP. So I'm gonna pause there in case I missed anything that you all wanted included as well.
I think that's what we had talked about
Okay.
and agreed to. I think that. Anybody else? David? No. Good. Okay, great.
Okay. So then we're going to go to section 2, which is the Vermont Manufactured Home Improvement and Repair Program. There are no differences between the House and the Senate version. And if you all recall, this is money that, goes to manufactured home communities and or individuals to help with getting lots ready, improvements that lots need, and or helping individuals with manufactured homes regarding habitability issues for their home.
So we can check off 2, and we have I believe there's a change in check off, sorry, next.
Yep, so check 2 is good. So section 3 is the Vermont Infrastructure Sustainability Fund. I do have some minor changes here that I do want to review with you all that's not in your side-by-side.
Okay, and we also had a typo.
Yes, and I have fixed that, yes. Let me back up, make sure we're referring to the same typo. Okay, so this is an amendment that I've been working on pulling together that is
that reflects our conversation on this.
Reflects the conversation we were just speaking about regarding VHIP, and I'm just scrolling down to section 3 because I want to highlight the languages on the Vermont Infrastructure Sustainability Fund specifically. So this is drafted as a strike-all amendment of 479 from this committee. It is draft 1.1. It has draft on it because most of this has been edited because it's, keeping the same language as has passed, but some of it will be new, and I haven't run it through our editors just yet. When you get to subsection D of the bond bank, the Infrastructure Sustainability Fund, so this is going to be on page 8 of your side-by-side, under number 2. It says, currently, the program shall provide low-interest loans or bonds to municipalities to expand infrastructure capacity. The bond bank recommended changing that language, as you can see now when I'm sharing my screen here. The program shall provide low-interest loans or purchase bonds from municipalities. The municipalities are actually the ones issuing the bonds here. They're just purchasing them from the municipalities.
I know we all know what a purchase bond is, but just for the people at home, what is a purchase bond? Oh,
They're just purchasing the
purchase the bonds.
from
I
the
gotcha.
municipalities.
Okay.
They're not providing the bonds.
When
to
you
the
said, I know we all know what a
municipalities.
purchase bond
Yeah.
is.
Type of bond.
Yes.
Purchase bond. Okay.
And so then under subsection C, line 6, Madam Chair, this is the typo that we fixed. It said waste and wastewater systems, and that was just a Scrivener's error, so we changed that to water and wastewater systems. And then the next change is on page 12 of this, but for you under the side-by-side, it's just the next page, page 9. And this is under subsection G. Currently, it says that the award terms have to include any additional covenants encumbering the improved properties. It's a little bit of.
Number 7.
Yes, ma'am. So currently, it's the award terms have to include any additional covenants encumbering the improved properties. It's a little bit of a mouthful, so the bond bank recommended changing that to any additional covenants required to further secure the loan. So it doesn't have to encumber the specific property itself. It could be something else. I don't have any issues with this language. It gives them a little more flexibility. And so I just included that here for your all consideration. And then the last thing here under revolving funds, the bond bank had requested, they believe they have the authority here, but they wanted to make it explicit, so they asked for this. It would be adding a subsection here to say that the bank may use the funds in conjunction with other bank programs to accomplish the policy objectives outlined in the section. So, they have different funds that they administer and different, financing provisions, and this isn't a lot of money going to them for the infrastructure sustainability fund. So they wanted to, or they're requesting that they be allowed to have some flexibility with those dollars to be able to use them in conjunction with other loan programs that they have, et cetera, to maximize the funds to the extent that they can. So.
Thoughts, committee?
I don't know how many people are gonna ask a question about what does that mean? Any other programs to accomplish? That's awfully
Pretty vague.
indefinite.
I kept it vague at their request, and if you have specific questions, I would invite you to bring in Michael Gahn and specifically ask them.
It's just an overall question. I don't know if the rest of the committee is comfortable with that.
I
don't know what it
I'm
means.
happy to have him come in on Tuesday, or tomorrow if we can, because it would be great to get this set tomorrow for him to clarify what that means. Happy to. I'm fine with this language in 3 and would be happy to, yeah, it is
So I'm
section
gonna
3.
I mean, it may be a minor point in terms of a question, but.
Happy to have Michael come in.
Yeah.
We'll
If not,
see if he's
something else
available.
you just go for
No.
first time. Review what they've done.
So I'm gonna switch back to side by side real quick. So it's the only thing I wanted to walk through with you there. And I'm just gonna mention that the primary difference between the House and the Senate version. So this is page 9 on the side by side, when you're looking at the subsection related to the application criteria. This is the criteria that the bond bank has to look at when looking, when reviewing applications coming in for whether or not to fund certain projects.
Right.
The initial language had the ranking of the community on the Vermont Department of Finance and Management Vermont Community Index, and the House did not include that language. This is page 9 on your side by side. The House did not include that language in their version that passed. You did, and so just whether or not you want any discussion on whether or not to include that.
And do you recall their reasoning for excluding it? Because I believe it was asked for in the original proposal from the bond bank.
It was asked for in the administration's bill that came to us, their housing bill proposal. My recollection from the House committee is the community index was developed specifically for I think it's the municipal technical assistance funds that were coming out of the Agency of Administration. And There was just concern about how that would impact certain communities on that index, maybe smaller communities that don't have such capacity. And so there's just, the committee was not comfortable with using that index for this purpose.
Okay, so if we're gonna ask Michael in tomorrow, we can ask him about both these pieces.
And he, yeah, I don't want to put words in his mouth. I don't know whether Michael Gahn, is gonna have a preference of whether to use the index or not.
He asked for it, so.
Yes, that's a question for him. I don't know who drafted the language when it came from the administration, if it came specifically from the bond bank or if it came from the administration, hi bond bank, we would like to do this and here's what we would like you to review. I don't know where the language initiated, whether it was from the administration or bond bank itself.
Okay, so are people okay with section 3? It does appear that we've gotten, I don't know why the numbers are different here. Anyway, other than having Michael come in, how are people with the rest of section 3?
Yes, I just hope I don't get asked to present this.
Okay, we'll ask, Heidi will ask Michael Gahn to come in on F4 and in section 3, F4 and G5.
Okay. I will keep your language for now, the Senate version with this in until you hear from Michael Gahn. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, this is the bottom of page 9. So this is just section 4 in the House bill, section 5 in your bill. The House had the Universal Design Study Committee. Your bill had the State Housing and Residential Services Planning Committee, which, if you recall, was to create a state plan to develop housing for individuals with developmental disabilities. Where the House committee was looking at statewide universal design standards. I know you heard from the chair of the current committee looking at residential and commercial energy codes regarding building design. You've also heard from Damien, I believe, on this piece. So my question to you all would just be, do you want both committees? Do you want one?
I know they're addressing similar aspects. I think we were pretty dug in on supporting the developmental disabilities work. And if we could combine them, it would be great. On the other hand, the universal design has to be done in some ways ahead of the statewide code, which sounds like it's behind, it's not, it would feed into. So it's unclear to me, but I am happy to either do both or combine them. And I don't know if they're easily combined. We could add, include in the charge of the disabilities, because universal design certainly complements what their hopes are, which are that any new building would be able to be adapted and made useful for those who are disabled in the future.
Any new building. Any new.
I think any new building is certain. I believe their hope would be that 1% of the new units would be done with this universal design standard in place, but that's what they're studying, is whether it's feasible, how to accomplish it, and what. I think then be proposing something as a result. We've heard. So the question is, do we do both? Do we do one? Do we try and combine them? That's, I think, what we have in front of us.
Or combined as an additional task would make more sense. The notion of continually creating board after board doesn't make sense.
Well, I think it makes sense because
if in fact they could do it.
I think if we give them this charge of additionally, this will take some more work to combine them. But I think in some ways their objectives are not dissimilar. Is that fair to say?
I think the advocates might argue that they are dissimilar in that one is creating a state plan for developing houses for those with developmental disabilities, and one is about how you design homes to ensure that people with physical disabilities can easily modify them.
Right, and
I'm not an expert, so I don't know how well those two things go together.
And whether or not it's easy to do, easy, not necessarily easy, but able to be done in a combined report, but presumably with separate sections that address clearly the individual points.
And they did not,
Under similar issues.
yeah,
There was question or discussion among this committee about combining the Universal Design Study Committee with
right,
that committee
and I
that's
think
already
we had
going
some
on.
pretty significant pushback on
Okay.
that, and they were not willing to do that.
Okay.
So, that was my takeaway. If anybody else has takeaway from that, my impression was that they were not willing to.
Aversion to
that.
that.
So, they did not include our developmental disabilities study,
Well, the House did not because they
Right.
were not.
so they chose to do this work instead,
Yes, ma'am.
which,
I would say there wasn't a lot of discussion at the committee of the developmental disabilities, committee that you all put in your bill. It just,
There was,
it did not make it in their committee discussion.
but there was an appointee on their list, including a board representing the Developmental Disabilities Council.
right. Oh, right,
Correct.
they have many aspects that are, I would suggest that we have, the strongest proponent of this, who we had not heard from, Elizabeth Burrows, is really the author of this section, is my understanding.
Yes, ma'am.
Come in and talk with us, if we can tomorrow, maybe, and if not on Tuesday, about how we might make effective use of one study committee trying to do, looking at both, and having a similar charge. And maybe that's too much, and maybe it needs to be separate. What do
I
you-
would rather, or that's fine, but I'd also like to hear two outside perspectives. One, someone
Yes,
from the disability community who can say which feels more pressing
Yeah.
to them and would make more of a difference in the short term, maybe Sarah Wanderville.
Sarah, Susan, yeah,
And two, I would like to hear from someone from the housing community what it would mean to do a residential universal design study and what that could do to the pace and cost of housing development. I worked on universal design in the city of Burlington. We did a playground. It was lovely. But we had a big conversation last year about access versus universal design versus a first floor versus whatever. There are elevator laws right now in Burlington, I think just Burlington and South Burlington, make it almost impossible to develop new multi-family housing or retrofit historic buildings for access. So sure, we can ask Representative Burrows how much they dug into that, but I don't want to create a study just to create a study because it could actually slow us down.
right. And I'm very keen on keeping the developmental disabilities moving forward. So let's do that. Let's have people in on Tuesday or tomorrow if we can get them, and look at how they feel this would impact their objectives.
Okay.
And we'll ask Sarah, Susan, and maybe Gus.
It's interesting to look at also the membership of the boards as defined by each of them. Because there seem like key people that may be left out in our solution. If nobody representing fire safety, for example.
Well, any one of them we could add, and just add stakeholders, because all of the, I mean, otherwise you have these huge committees. So,
I know,
I would
Fire is
encourage
pretty
us to,
important when you're doing design though.
yeah, well, you can add stakeholders at any point and call them in and have them testify as to that aspect of a building that they need to be addressing. But to have them permanent, I mean, it's just, this is 16 people, which is a lot.
It's a lot.
So,
A few very quick notes on
Yeah.
this. I will just comment that, if you move forward with your study committee, the, state plan for, creating housing for those with developmental disabilities, I will comment that as it originally came out of the committee, it has our office
Yeah.
staffing it.
And DHCD, I think, is willing to take this on, and
Yeah, in the House, they've discussed and changed that to Department of Housing and Community Development. It's not really our place to develop a state plan for development of housing. And so I would request that be amended if it remains. So the only other thing I will comment is the differences, in the House version, they did provide, compensation to both legislative members and members who are not otherwise compensated. They put a caveat in here in subsection H that those per diems are not available in the event that there isn't an appropriation for it. And so just a question of if you would like to keep that in your study committee, if that one moves forward. You don't need to answer me now, because it sounds like there will be a little bit more discussion on this, but just thought for consideration if you want to include that language in a final version. Okay, now on your side-by-side here, we're on page 13. The next few topics, this one's section 5, but then later on, I'm gonna kind of combine these two concepts. You have the CAMA system, which is not in your bill, so the question is whether to keep it in your amendment to 479 or whether you would like to remove it. So this is, adding to the information that towns provide to the tax departments, an extract of their computer-assisted mass appraisal system. And then this kind of goes hand in hand with the changes to the landlord certificate, which is further down in the side-by-side. But I'll just pause here, Madam Chair, and whether you all would like to keep those in your amendment to 479.
I am very supportive of keeping this in, and it certainly addresses something we've been wanting to do for a while. So I would hope that we would all be supportive of this. We have good testimony on this and on the landlord certificate. So I would hope we would move forward with this. And we can, Maura and Chad and the tax department, and we've had, I know it's been a while since we heard from them all, but I had no notes or changes listed on this. I don't know if other people did.
I haven't heard anything negative from anybody about it, so I don't know.
Yeah, no,
That section that you're looking at again, make sure I'm not.
Section 5, on the House side, on page 13.
The CAMA system is here on section 5, page 13, as Madam Chair just mentioned. The landlord certificate is going to be down on page 23. It's section 17.
Yeah, it's too bad this
18. And so I'm just pulling that up here. I'm sharing this screen. But if you recall, this is repealing the changes to the landlord certificate that was made last year, then reinserting with some slight amendments to the language in section 18.
23.
Page 23, section 18, and section 17,
Yeah.
sections 17 and 18. So I'm ready to check those off if everybody else is.
I'm trying to remember what Michelle Cooper Smith was raising, but I feel like that issue was resolved.
It's public.
on this.
It's
So,
already public information.
Okay.
And
well, so, the upshot is that we have about 90% participation in the landlord certificate. It is becoming more and more required, I would say. It used to be that you helped someone else get a benefit, and, so more and more small landlords are figuring out that they have the responsibility to put the names of all of their tenants on this form and submit it to tax.
That's already been the case for some time.
yes, it's been required, but not
I want to
necessarily compliant.
represent former Representative Cooper Smith's perspective responsibly. She worried about privacy concerns, and we had a lengthy conversation about how the tax department pretty much already has the general sense of every person living in the state and their whereabouts, or that person is committing tax fraud, or is in trouble for evading the law. So that was a new layer for her, that there isn't really any privacy that's being violated. I still was willing to accept from her that she feels like maybe it's too much of a imposition or burden on the landlord to have to list everybody's name for those verification purposes. if they could just list the overall household income. That, so I leave it in the committee's hands that I do understand her concern that landlords are learning they have to list everybody's name. I did talk to her about maybe landlords should know the names of everyone who was living in
And if they don't know their names, how are they gonna know their incomes?
Is there these
Yeah.
public documents publicly
These-
searchable, or is this the tax?
No,
department?
this is
Okay.
all-
I mean,
There's
just
all tax
yeah,
department
fine.
information that's
Yes.
presumably confidential.
confidential, and
information.
we made sure this is confidential,
Yeah.
but used for data purposes.
Right.
So we, I think as opposed to others who advocate for other things in this building, by making this confidential, I think we leaned more toward addressing her concern.
Yes,
And I think it's really important this is confidential.
yes.
But I
What's
do,
What's the purpose of it? That's what I'm,
Yeah, what's the goal?
yeah,
what's the goal of which?
the landlords, having landlords.
Oh,
in the first
so-
place.
We
So.
talked about this quite a bit last year.
Well,
I mean, so the landlord certificate used to only be submitted to help the renter
Mhm.
get their renter rebate.
Mhm.
So it's all a construction of the renter rebate. We've added that if you want a tax break for renting your property, to the property transfer tax, then you also need to submit a landlord certificate to demonstrate that you're renting. So this was actually the governor's construct originally, is when they wanted to give some people a tax break for repurposing blighted properties,
Mhm.
but they said, but we don't want to do it for second homeowners or for short-term rental folks. They said we could do that with the landlord certificate and or a homestead declaration. And I said, great,
Yeah, that was
that's a
Laura.
great way.
So Laura had come to us
Yeah,
with,
that's right.
with
I
this
remember
proposal.
that.
Yeah,
Which proposal? The landlord
So-
certificate?
both.
Oh, but that was it. She came to us wanting more data in the landlord
Yeah.
certificate, and that's when we made it confidential.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, so
So-
just
The
Adam,
fact is, the confidential tax document that makes you more comfortable in addressing Michelle's concern.
Yes.
For sure.
There are people, I think, in a very broad sense right now, I worry that people are thinking we can do something about lists of names of people that could be misused. If the tax department falls in terms of its confidentiality, we are living in another country, we are living in another state. So
But we're,
this is the most confidential place this information can be.
even we, as you all of us know at this table, when we've tried to advocate for our constituents with tax, we are come up against the brick wall most of the time.
That's right, yeah.
So I feel absolute confidence that this is going to be a very beneficial tool for, our understanding what the rental housing market looks like and, having a much better understanding of this universe, which is what we've been trying to accomplish. So I am okay with section 17, 18, and 5. And
the other, only one comment I'll make here,
Yeah.
or 1A and 1B, is the name of the renter, as was mentioned previously, Senator Ron Hinza. This has been required for many years.
Right.
It's not new. The only other piece I'll add is you all also are further restricting the information's use in subsection F, and this is a carryover to what you all did last year.
right, yes.
Currently, the information can be made available to a member of the public in a database, but it doesn't include any of the renter's information. You're removing that and you're saying that the tax department will provide you all with aggregate information about the landlord certificate moving forward. So if anything, the information is being further restricted moving forward. So,
Great. And,
okay.
Why?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I must have lost track. Why are
so
we
we're
getting?
back at, sorry, we were at section 5.
What?
This is in the landlord certificate piece, and this change to subsection F was done last year. So
That's what we.
I was not here, so unfortunately I
Okay.
can't advise
But
you.
we asked for a report to these committees.
Yes, so currently, the information in the landlord certificate right here,
Mhm.
annually, the department prepares and makes available to a member of the public upon request, a database a sortable spreadsheet that contains, it's primarily landlord information, not information about
It's
the
where
tenants.
units are, what
Yep.
units are, where they are, and that, which
I
is what we
think
wanted.
I propose we strike the report to us. It's a report that I don't remember us asking for or needing. The point for us was that this information is made available to DHCD.
VHF, yeah.
DHCD shares it with
Yeah.
VHFA, so
Right.
that our only job is to make it available to DHCD to work to aggregate the data. I don't think it's good for us to have this report.
And I don't think anything here changes their
Yeah.
giving the information to DHCD,
Mhm.
but it does now have, the information being submitted to you all in aggregate.
I find that messy. I just think it's I'd rather we get the data through the process we've set up for good data collection and best practices and not have data floating around that hasn't gone through that really careful process.
I'm fine with that. I think that would be fine, because then we'll have a report from them anyway on this.
Yeah, we get a report from them. We don't.
Exactly, and we got a
look at
report
this
from
on the roll.
VHFA on it. So I feel, I think that having that avenue is fine, but this was in our original.
So you're okay with going back, not having this report?
Having the report sent to DHCD.
That should exist in the language from last year. That wasn't touched.
Right. I
Yeah.
think DHCD will get the information from.
We need to make,
Yeah,
I would make it, if
Well,
we're
that
gonna
is
make it
explicit,
explicit here, then.
explicit in the bill we wrote last year.
So how about this? I will, if you're okay with it, I will talk to them and figure
Mhm.
out,
Great.
maybe gather a little more information about where this came from, this change
Point,
here.
point me to the language regarding public request of the report that you mentioned. You mentioned public request of the information report. You said there was something specific in the language of the bill?
It's being struck right here.
Mhm.
So you'll
Yeah.
see on subsection F, so current language right now is annually on or before the 31st, the department prepares and
Okay.
makes available to a member of the public
Right.
information in a database, in a
So
sortable
it's section,
spreadsheet
it's
that
section
contains.
18. then.
It's section
Yeah, it's the
18
bottom
of
of
the
section.
House version.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Right there on the top of page 24. And this is just a carryover from last year, so it was struck last year. And the underlying language was added, and since we're repealing what you did last year to insert new language,
Mhm.
it was proposed to be kept, so I'll get some more information.
Great. Terrific. So,
So is the implication then that the data is not a public document or available to ask as a free, of an Open Records Act request?
Presumably, if there is a document that they're aggregating the information to give to you all, it's gonna.
It's aggregated,
That's
it's not
probably the
individualized.
presumption there, is if the information is being provided to you all as a report, then the public has access to it via that method.
Well, then the question that I've got is, does the public, with this language struck, and there's no report now to the committees of the legislature, if a member of the public would like the report redacted of individual names, is that a public document? And I'm assuming it's a tax department document. It would not be.
If the question, how I would approach it is, if they have a document where they have aggregated that information, then
Well, if they,
It's a
the tax
public
department
record.
produces an internal document for that purposes, for tax purposes, is that a public record?
I would
I don't
argue.
know how the exclusion works for the tax department information, whether it's information about individual taxpayers as opposed to aggregate information, because they do produce some aggregate information for tax trends and so on.
I will have to talk to, I think Tucker is probably the best in our office to deal with public records. My understanding is if it's a record and they have it, it's a public record unless it's specifically excluded, and I
And this
doubt
is
it would
specifically
be.
I would
So
doubt.
then the question would just be, is there an exemption from the Public Records Act where they wouldn't have to provide it if somebody requested it? And I assume if it's got individual taxpayer information on it, it's probably excluded under their own tax provisions. Just thinking like back to labor, right? All of our unemployment records are pretty much, confidential if it includes individual information on it. So, but let me try to grab some information, do a little bit.
great. So with that change of the report going, thank you, Isla, to DHCD, I will look at that, but I think conditionally on that, I'm okay. How are people feeling? I'm okay to check off section 5, 17, and 18.
The landlord certificate and the camera.
Yeah.
So, okay.
And,
As long as we're getting rid of that report to us.
right, I said with that conditional change. Conditioned on that change.
Okay,
Well, it's
I'm
either
gonna,
that, or you say something, you do something specific regarding the landlord certificate. The landlord certificate is not a public record, it's treated as a tax record.
That should exist. I don't, this is not nearly
This is-
all the language that we included.
Right.
We got so specific with emergency management and blah, blah, blah. That just isn't here, and I'm not sure.
Well, it's from last year,
Right, so it just,
so
yeah.
it's already law. So I would suggest we keep
It's
going.
already
I'm-
law that it is not a public document, you're saying?
We made that law
We
last
made
year.
that very clear, remember we
None
had
of
this
the
discussion
information.
last year.
Because none of the taxpayer information would have ever been
The
public.
taxpayer would not,
But you could still get a spreadsheet that said the address,
that's,
the
yeah.
blah, 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 who
I
owned
remember
it.
discussing that.
That's all confidential so that we can get better data and
Where does it
people
say
can fill
that?
out the landlord certificate. It's what we passed last year,
It's
we
what
just
we
don't have
already
it
have
right
passed.
now.
And what the
So
tax
we-
department testified to,
Could you just give me the reference of where I can look that up?
yes. And
I would just
Rebecca,
bring it.
yeah, and Jill Remick and, they were in testifying to
Yeah,
that.
I don't remember exactly what we did regarding the availability of information, so clearly I should be able to look at the statute
Mm-hmm.
as it exists now and see that, and that's what I'm at, just for the
Let's
reference.
just
Mhm.
clarify that from last year for me, that would be great.
okay.
So, next section, so are people okay, given that, conditioning that
Mhm.
change?
Yep.
Okay with those sections 5, 17, and 18? Great.
Okay.
Good.
I'm gonna bring you back to page 14 of your side-by-side. Section 4 of your bill was the rental revolving loan program and the change that was in the Budget Adjustment Act that DHFA was requesting. If you all recall, if you get money from the rental housing revolving loan program, they cap your annual rent increase at 3%. This is here under page 14, as I said, right here at the bottom of that section 4. They're asking to propose or an amount otherwise authorized by the agency. So my question to you is, do you want to incorporate this into your amendment to 479? Because it was not in 479.
Absolutely, and I think it's a timing issue on this, and I think, the BAA was floundering at a point where we were able to include this, and they wanted to protect it, and, I think it's a timing issue. So absolutely.
Okay, I'm gonna keep moving with incorporation of that in.
I think
Okay.
we check off section 4 on our.
So now we're on to section 7, which is the DHCD Land Bank report.
Right.
This
This was, terrific. We have had great testimony on this from Jim Tischler and Sean Gilpin and, the other chap from Michigan. And this sounds terrific. And
I have
there's
some
an
minor
update.
proposals based
Exactly.
on.
Sean, based on our conversation with Sean, he had some specific requests.
So.
Can you remind us what those are?
Yes, ma'am. So apologies, I'm gonna switch to another document, which is this draft amendment that I've been pulling together. And so this is the same section, and it's the land bank report section. The only changes here are the language highlighted in yellow. I went back, I listened to the testimony that you all had last Friday from the Department of Housing and from the individuals from Michigan regarding their land bank. The recommendation was to extend the report out to 2026. So that's what you have here, November 1, 2026. Based on conversation amongst the committee members, added some of this language here and what the report has to include. So specific legislative language regarding the creation and ongoing administration of a land bank, identification of funding proposals to support the establishment and sustainability of each model. So seed money was the conversation that you all had.
Yep.
And how do you start that? And then on the next page.
Yes, remember they sold a state property and that used that as to seed their land bank.
And so then under 18, since you're moving the report out to 2026, there's in January 15 of 2026, they need to provide a written update.
Right.
Regarding progress made, including a preliminary assessment of the information required in the final report.
Great.
That's what I drafted up based on the conversation that you all were having.
It's our new section 7.
Yes, ma'am.
Great. I'm excited actually about this. Any thoughts? Because I think we did good work on this and Sean's input was very helpful and Jim was terrific.
This better be the last study on land banks that we do, and then we're gonna decide what we're actually doing. This is starting to feel like sports betting.
I agree,
Okay,
I agree.
back to your side by side. I'm gonna pause here on page 15.
I keep going until Alan gets here and if,
Okay.
because we were doing such good work, we may, I'd really love to finish this because we know we
Okay.
have further work to do on appeals.
And so that's where I'm just gonna pause here because this is where appeals starts. So
Right,
I know
but I
you're
don't know if
seeing, so now I'm gonna have to skip
she's-
forward.
Okay,
She could have seen it and just not.
okay,
I'm gonna skip forward all the way to page 21.
great.
Okay, so now we're on Brownfield property cleanup. Section 13 of 479, 12 of 127, page 21 of your side by side. This is to prioritize for Brownfield property cleanup. The secretary needs to prioritize review of remediation at sites that contain housing. The House version had housing or that's planned for the construction or rehabilitation of single or multifamily housing. So the question is, do you want to keep the House language? Do you want to go with your language? Do you want to make tweaks to the House language?
So sorry, I was just feeling,
That's okay. We're on page 21 of your side by side, looking at the Brownfield property cleanup and the prioritization.
great, I'm,
I
What are
personally
your
would,
thoughts?
I personally would get rid of this section because I trust that they are prioritizing things appropriately. There could be a site that has more contamination, it's closer to where other people live, it's, been on the docket for a while, like, I think this is patting ourselves on the back, and I don't think it's a good idea.
it was great that A&R was willing to do this, and I would,
A&R should be willing to do a lot of other things that actually make a difference.
well, they may, but
Ones and
we've
none.
had, certainly had cooperation with them on this, and I would encourage us to keep it. It's, I think Brownfield, are you talking about just about section 12?
No, I don't know. It says section 13 on one side as well.
So did I take from your comment that you think it's superfluous, but you also closed by saying you think it's a bad idea? Why is it a bad idea?
So we heard from Judge Zone why it's a bad idea to ever, as the legislative branch, direct the executive or judicial branch to prioritize something when they're a separate branch of government. And I believe that we should trust that they will prioritize things in the way that best serves Vermonters.
I get that for the judicial branch. I don't necessarily agree with that for the executive branch. But we're supposed to be prioritizing for them.
Yeah, and housing is our priority at the moment, so underscoring it for me at this moment is important.
I don't know what we're prioritizing it over,
Brownfield cleanups,
but what are we prioritizing it over? Other brownfield cleanups.
correct,
What-
other ones
Industrial.
that may not be,
Industrial. Doesn't make
Vacant
sense.
lot.
or,
Those could all be for future housing.
yes.
Well,
Correct,
then,
It's not zoned that way, so if the city has
so
a zone as
places that
industrial.
are, yes, where housing would be appropriate and possible.
That, there's no housing, there's no zoning, that's not a zoning thing.
I don't see it as a bad idea.
I don't think it's a bad idea, I would agree, I think it's, they do add, the House adds a piece that does further qualify it. That would be where it would be, or that's planned for the construction or rehabilitation of single or multifamily housing, and I'm happy to keep that.
I don't like that at all. If we're gonna prioritize anything, I'd prioritize multifamily housing. But I don't know why we spell out both single family and multifamily housing. This is like literally a waste of time.
well, the only aspect that I agree with is our language says a site that contains housing, which to me would mean
It's
that
broad.
it contains housing right now. not that it's projected to contain housing in the future.
Well, there wouldn't be a brownfield site that needs remediation that contains housing, I don't believe.
Yes, it could be a building that had housing that is now vacant, and that it would be, absolutely be able to be redeveloped for housing. We saw several photos of that,
What did we see photos of?
of the brownfield sites. Hi, Ellen.
That have existing housing?
That had housing that were cleaned up and then became repurposed for housing also.
Like a fire total loss, would that be a brownfield, burns down to the ground? No.
Probably not, because I don't think fire creates a brownfield unless there's certain chemicals that it puts in.
Unless the soil's become contaminated.
I can think of a place in South Burlington, right at the corner of Heinsberg Road and Williston Road, used to be a house, then it was a shop, and then it was demolished, and so it's just sitting there vacant, and I'm just wondering, is that a brownfield that could be housing?
I think if we're gonna direct another branch of government to do anything, we should know what we're doing, and I don't think we do, so I don't like this.
We do, I disagree. I think that we're directing them to prioritize housing as they review what they're funding for brownfield cleanup. And that,
Is this for funding?
yes, this is for funding and work of what are the
doesn't
next
say-
brownfield cleanup projects that they're undertaking. And if it is,
If you are saying prioritize a site for housing for funding, I think that's different than what's here.
it's reviewing the remediation, you can't remediate without funding it. So it's reviewing, it is prioritizing the reviewing of remediation at a site that contains housing.
This is investigating, abating, removing, remediating, and monitoring. This is not funding. If it was funding, I would support it, but it's not funding. It's saying we're gonna prioritize all the actions related to this one parcel over another without knowing why we would be doing that. And what you just said is inaccurate, so further, we don't know.
We
what we're
don't
doing.
need to be quite as combative as this is becoming. I don't think we're all rowing in the same direction here.
This
We're
isn't
all-
about funding.
Then let's, these are O'Grady's sections.
Yes.
Let's get O'Grady in if we need to discuss these further, but these are already in the budget. This is already work that is ongoing. This committee supports brownfield cleanup so that we can develop more housing in our downtown and village centers, which have the predominant number of brownfields that we have to clean up before we can have more housing.
What is the problem we're solving here that was brought to us as a problem? What is not working about
problem
the
is-
brownfields program right now?
Problem was that that brownfields were not addressed in the governor's budget, and that we want to continue supporting the cleanup of brownfields, which is an expensive undertaking and
For
has
housing, to prioritize housing.
to
That's-
prioritize.
Basically, yeah, as I read this simply, it just says, in dealing with brownfields, prioritize housing, period.
Right.
That's all it says.
Then I disagree. I would say prioritize funding for housing,
But
but I
think
wouldn't
that
say
goes
just
hand in glove.
prioritize doing the work, because that's an environmental decision, not a financial decision.
Well, this is what we passed, this is what we did on the floor, and I'm happy to have Mike come in and have us discuss this
Did
further,
we
because
get more money for brownfields?
we did get some money for brownfields, which
What
was
was
better
the
than none.
additional?
I think we got $1 million, sadly, not enough.
So just $1 million, not the 2 million.
Not
So-
the 4, we asked for 4 and we got 1.
But there was 2 in the original budget.
There were 2, I think we had asked for 1.
There is, in both the House and the Senate language, there is a repurposing of 2.5 from DC to the Environmental Contingency Fund here.
Did that make it through the budget?
It's in both of your bills. And it was not, I do not recall that it was stripped out by this is as passed, so no, it was not stripped out by the Appropriations Committee in either House or Senate. But
Because it's
again, this is,
repurposing.
yes, ma'am, that's what you said. This is a repurposing of dollars that had already been
Right.
appropriated. It's not new money. I don't recall if the request from this committee of additional brownfield fundings came out in the Senate budget.
We'll double
So
check.
what's actually silly to me is, if I'm reading this correctly, the funding isn't prioritizing housing, just the oversight.
I don't want to speak out of turn because it's O'Grady's section. So I don't know when
And
it's, prioritizing the review, where that falls in line with the funding aspects of that, I'm not sure.
And if it doesn't, we'll underscore it, because that's what it needs to be.
I would
That's what our
move
hope
that
is.
we put priority in the funding section and take it out of the environmental decision-making section.
It's a decision about which priority projects they are going to prioritize for remediation. Any remediation costs money. So therefore, the assumption, I think, and we'll have to get O'Grady in to confirm it, the assumption
I'm reading the
is-
language on the screen, and we shouldn't assume things without reading the
Right,
language,
I'm not
which doesn't
assuming it.
prioritize the funding for housing.
Right, I'm happy to get Mike in to clarify where that would belong in these sections, which are his.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
my esteemed colleague is here, and would you like to review appeal language before we conclude for the morning? Or would you like me to keep going?
well, I think our appeals are a bigger conversation than 15 minutes, probably. And so I apologize, but I think we're on a good roll here with Pam, really trying to get through this and see what the sections, what additional work we need to do, and that's what we're doing. So we know we need to do additional work on appeals, or not, and people may be happy with where we are. So with that, I would ask if we could reschedule you, and I apologize, but this is good work for us to be doing, because we haven't, the challenge with our time is what you already know. Ellen, thank you.
I'm gonna keep going then, so bring us back, we're on page 21 of this side-by-side. And so we're gonna put a pin in this section 13 and 12. Section 14, the next section, section 15, these are the same in both the House and the Senate version. This is a process improvement report from the Agency of Natural Resources. My understanding is this report is about making additional process improvements to the brownfield program. And again, it was the same language. And then again, section 15, as I mentioned a moment ago, was a repurposing of those dollars to the Environmental Contingency Fund. So,
What is the study doing?
it's a report, and I'm sorry, it keeps bouncing between screens there, so my apologies. So
It's an
Proposals.
internal report on their part.
yeah,
So,
it's a proposal, I would probably highlight, it's got a few subdivisions we can look at specifically, but it is a proposal to make the program, the brownfield reuse and limited liability limitation substantially more efficient.
I would move to include urban soils language here and have that section be our discussion about how to move forward with improving the brownfields process for this year. And then it can go to natural resources and they can decide if they would keep it in there. But A&R has actually has agreed to that language that does not have us shipping dirt.
So
They have already agreed to our language, and that's coming up. They've already agreed to this. We've already gone through this.
and that's what I was gonna say, so those three sections we were just looking at further up were the same in the House and the Senate. You all included two additional sections. I've jumped down to page 29 on this side-by-side. But section 10 regarding management of development soils, and then the report on the management of those development soils.
Is that only in brownfields right now, or it's all development soils?
I believe it. was
My assumption
all-
is all.
It was
I-
all development soil.
But that's, I don't know if that's true because I think we lost Ellen.
Let's hope that
But-
O'Grady,
This would
this
be
is
O'Grady.
all
Oh,
O'Grady.
okay,
Yep.
because we had a conversation where the larger question of development soils is in the bill in natural resources, and the language related to brownfields is in here. That's the last thing I remember. That's why it's in S-133, even though Ellen, O'Grady, and Cameron worked to divide.
But we passed this, this I believe is for all development soils,
Well, let's
and
have
this is
Cameron
another
verify
opportunity.
that.
We'll have O'Grady come in and clarify that.
So for now, pending further conversation, my assumption though is you all would like the two sections that you had in your original bill incorporated into 479.
Yes.
Pending further discussion from, okay. So apologies, I'm skipping all the way back up
So
to,
Grady's sections are section 10 through 14, is that right?
on 479, it's sections 13, 14, 15, and then sections 10 and 11 on the Senate version. So down page 29 of your side-by-side.
Sorry, I've got,
It's difficult to make these side-by-sides effective sometimes when they're different sections and two different bills, so.
so, on our, so, in our bill though, it was sections 12, 13, 14, and then I thought section
Yes, 10
10
and
were the
11.
developmental
Yes,
swells.
10, 11, 12, 13, 14 in your bill. That we will incorporate the two sections, 10 and 11, back into 479.
Okay.
Okay. I'm on page 23 of your side-by-side, where we're looking at 17 and 18 that we've already discussed. So I'm keeping us
Right.
language that we get,
Signed off on
keeping
this.
it. Okay. Section 19 and 19A. If you all recall, there was in the House version, the Vermont Housing Finance Agency coming back with a report regarding, development of off-site housing. And
This was, we struck this, we did not fund
because
it.
it had a $250,000 attachment to it.
Right, and so and the House kept it despite the fact that it had no funding?
The House kept it with the funding out of the House General Committee, but then the House Appropriations Committee removed the appropriation and put this section 19, which was, the requirement to implement the report is contingent on appropriations, and then they did not appropriate it. So there was no money for the report. My understanding, based on comments that have been made to me by others, so clearly hearsay, is that VHFA was still planning to conduct the work as they had resources to do.
Thank you, I appreciate that. The question I have for you is, and for the committees, do we still need the language here if they're gonna continue to do this?
That I think is the question. If you can strike it because there was no appropriation, so,
On the other hand, if it's there, we also know and then we'll hopefully.
the House was going to keep the language because they wanted to signal to VHFA that they still want them to work on these specific aspects. And it just says kind of, as resources allow, VHFA shall work on these things and provide a report to the General Assembly by 2026. So
there,
I would strike it.
It's already been struck, right? We struck it.
yes, it was not included in your bill.
we didn't include it because we struck the funding.
Because, yes, you were not.
And they're
supporting
wanting
that
to keep it because they think that keeping the language will keep VHFA focused on this work, which I think they'll be focused on anyway. And this committee could send a letter to Maura and Chad saying, we are looking forward to the results.
I wouldn't even do that because
Whatever.
there is so much funding falling out of the bottom of the economy right now in so many programs that I don't want to tell anyone to do anything. That we hope, please, they would do something because I trust that they know what they need.
So committee, how do we feel? I'm happy with striking it, but I also feel, I also appreciate the House's point of view. So either way, what were your thoughts?
We're not funding it.
Yeah, if we're not funding it, well, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, great. Okay, let's strike it for our next draft.
Okay. That brings us to page 26 of your side-by-side. I'm not worried about effective dates just yet. It's going to depend on what ultimately is in your amendment. The next few sections, so it's page 26, section 6, section 7, section 8, which runs all the way through page.
These are our unfair housing practices.
Yes, ma'am. This is
So
page
the
29.
House
Yeah.
is working on a separate bill. They're either going to be modifying and working on this, or they're doing this as a separate bill. I think we worked hard on these sections, and I think it's sections 8 and 9, is that
It
right?
should be sections 6, 7, and 8.
6, 7, and 8.
And this is adding
Right.
in, citizenship into, fair housing practices and citizenship and immigration status into public accommodations.
If I may, Madam Chair?
Yes.
I understand there was another bill addressing this, H-169. Has that moved at all, or is that sitting in committee?
It's in House General, and House General has had testimony on it and has asked for amendments drafted, and their question that they're still discussing is whether to move that forward as a standalone bill, as Madam Chair just mentioned, or whether to drop it into their amendment to your Housing Bill 127.
Interesting. I'm fine with keeping our language, but
I believe strongly we should keep our language.
Yeah, I do too.
I
And-
will,
Yeah, and so independent, I mean, I think for the moment, we want to make sure we keep this in. That's-
I apologize if I'm throwing a stick in my own path as I'm walking forward here.
It should be a
Uh,
bicycle
yeah,
deal,
yeah.
Kim.
It's because you're doing both
but-
of these things.
It is my job. Section 7 here on the screen, public accommodations, has citizenship and immigration status. If you all recall, initially, the fair housing piece had citizenship and immigration status as well. My recollection is
Sorry, which had,
the unfair housing practices had citizenship and immigration status.
Right.
And the public accommodations kept immigration status. If I recall, the conversation among the committee was there was concern in the housing piece. This subsection 6, it says that an individual cannot discriminate in the making or purchasing of loans and providing other financial assistance. There was concern that was shared with the committee from the banking
Right.
industry about immigration status, and they have specific federal authorization to verify or to take into account, I should say, immigration status when determining the risk for issuance of loans, etc. So at the time, there wasn't, I think, these are my words here, you all were pressed for time, and it was okay, if we're not gonna be able to cross this bridge, remove it for now. There's a few pieces here. We didn't remove it in public accommodations.
Yeah.
I've had conversations since you passed this bill with Maria Royal, and I've had conversations with the Human Rights Commission. And some will argue that by keeping immigration status in public accommodations, it could stretch to financial institutions, even though you've removed it from the unfair housing piece, okay? What the House has done at this point, and the language that they've looked at as far as an amendment goes, is they've added specific language. If you remember, under unfair housing practices, at the end, it said, if it's required by federal law, verification of immigration status doesn't constitute a violation of subsection A with sale and rental of dwellings. They've added additional language to specifically state that it's not a violation for financial institutions to take into account immigration status when determining their risk of whether or not to issue loans, etc., to try to alleviate the concern of the banking institutions in regards to subsection 6. I'm bringing all this up for two reasons. One, if you're going to move forward with your language, then we should probably have a conversation about what it means to keep immigration status in the public accommodations section, if you're going to keep it there and not put it in the housing piece. And I'm also just advising you that the House has included a specific provision in the housing piece to try to alleviate the concern that was raised to you all about the issuance of loans. This is a very in-depth conversation that I've spent a few hours with that committee discussing, because it does have some federal law implications here. So
What
my
is
job to
exactly,
advise
again, the
you all.
piece that was put in to deal with their concern?
If you give me a moment, I can pull it up.
Okay.
Yeah, why don't we do that? And then, we're almost ready at time, and I know.
Yeah, I do need to leave it.
me too.
I
So
will-
then, given how big this conversation is, maybe let's return to it.
Okay.
I think, in fairness. So I think actually, Cam, when we take this up on, we're gonna have some tomorrow and Tuesday. maybe tomorrow. Let's pick this up here, and if we
Yes,
could,
ma'am.
compare what the house,
Yes.
what the house is working on and what we are, because it seems silly, quite honestly, to send over stuff that is being improved on,
I will walk through their amendment with you all tomorrow morning, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the legal issues that have come up since then.
Right.
Honor made worse.
thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, great,
Have a wonderful afternoon.
yeah.